Hello everyone, welcome to Cheers Cakes and my name is Deepak. Here in this tutorial we are going to be talking about optimizing images, and you may wonder why optimizing images is a separate video tutorial in the series and why is this even a thing. You may also wonder why not optimizing CSS or why not optimizing HTML or why not optimizing JavaScript has become a different module. So in order to understand why optimizing images is so important in the lifecycle of a web application, I would want to bring your attention to something important, right? So if you look at here, this is a web.dev article, and this particular article tells you the idea and why it is really required for you to look for images and their betterment and their performance separately, right? And I'll quickly give you a gist of what it tells. So it tells us that, let's say if you are loading a page, right? So and when you have multiple images loading or being loaded in the background from the HTTP calls, meaning if you look at the website that we are trying to build here, so you may notice that once I do a refresh, it calls up all these APIs and try to load them. So once you are calling an API or once you're calling an HTTP call to receive an image, right, you do a lot of things in the background, such that queuing up your request, and then once the response arrives, then it does the painting on the browser, and there's a lot of tasks that happens. So if you come here at the performance tab, so what I'm going to do is let me just refresh and give you a gist of what I'm talking about. So you may notice that after 2 seconds of delay, it loaded all these images, and if I want to bring your attention here only to this particular thing, you would wonder that, if you do not know these different color graphs and things, please don't worry about it. I'm going to be giving you a gist of all of it, and also while I talk about all of this, you would understand why it is important. So let's just focus on this part. Okay, so here you may notice that if the moment we hit on restart of a page right after this, right, so the first HTML page arrived somewhere about 998 milliseconds, which is far less than a second, or probably 13 milliseconds to 18 milliseconds. And after 13 milliseconds, your JavaScript bundle started to receive on the browser. You can see that, right? So why they are placed like one after the other, and sometimes in a queue or sometimes in a row, is sometimes in a column and sometimes in a row, is also because, let's say if this particular JavaScript reference was given inside the JavaScript given here, then obviously this will be loaded a little while later, or at least after this particular file is being loaded. So if you look closely all over this graph, you would realize that once your JavaScript file loads, right after that the CSS loads, because the purple color thing is a CSS and it's a rendering blocking event. You can see that the priority is the highest. You can probably see that in the pop-up. And then the same thing happens with this particular CSS as well, meaning this particular CSS, the second row, would be defined or referenced here in any one of the JavaScript which is on the second row, right? Now let's just move forward. So you may notice that if we come here, because we had given a 2 seconds of delay, and post that 2 seconds of loading icon, we want these images to be loaded, right? So if you come here, and you would notice that we are making call to all these images from the HTML, and these are being loaded one after the other. And why they are displaying a stairs sort of a pattern is also because that as and when you load a page from the top to bottom, and as and when they appear on the page, right after that they make a call to the image source, and that's how this dummy json.com brings all these images on the page. But you may also wonder that, let's say currently we have a decent enough internet. Let's say if the internet is slow, let's say we are serving or the servers which are rendering these images are slow, you will notice that your LCP would increase. So what do you mean by LCP? LCP is the largest contentful paint, so which gets late. And although you can see that the onload was fired pretty early, which is below the 90 millisecond mark in this particular case, but then let's say if you have these largest contentful paint happening frequently and it is taking up for too much of time, you would find that your website is have some sort of a jank, right? So this is a very important aspect, and this is something which is very important, not really available in other frameworks out of the box. However, Angular has recently provided this image optimization, and that's why it is important for us to cover in this particular tutorial. Right, so whenever I think I'm pretty much clear about LCP. Now let me take you to the page, and you may understand that. Please write down in the comment section below if you do not understand what DCLL, FP, FCP, and LCP is. I can probably try to create a different video tutorial around it, and you would be able to understand what these things are and why they are important in your front-end developer journey, right? So why this is really happening and why this call is being happening after 2 seconds is also because we have given the placeholder right there in the HTML. So what I'm going to do next is, like, I'll just take you back to the code, and here is the code. I'm going to be commenting out everything other than the important stuff, and then what I'll do is, like, I'll remove this loading part here because I don't think so I need this in order to display this particular bit. And let me arrange this properly. All right, so now I'll again take you back to the Chrome browser, and here is the Chrome browser. What I'm going to do is, like, I'll just remove everything and then just give it a load once again. So LCP happened at 67 milliseconds, so this is a good thing. Please understand that it is being it is recommended by Google that if it is less than 2.5 seconds, it is considered to be good, and it needs improvement if it is greater than 2.5 seconds to less than 4 seconds. And it needs an immediate attention if it is greater than 4 seconds. So this is something, a recommendation from the Google, and this particular performance page has been changed a little bit in the recent version of Chrome. And earlier it used to display a different look and feel. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'll just quickly give you a refresh to this particular page and again take you back to the graphs that we were looking at earlier. So let it load, and there you go. So let me just summarize this bit alone. Now you can see that obviously the FCP or the load fired somewhere about 110.5057 milliseconds, which is certainly less than 120 milliseconds. And let me bring this down here. So now please pay attention. You may notice that this CSS was loaded here, as you can see on the first 2 rows. Let me bring it this way. You can see that there are multiple JavaScript being called. The first set of JavaScript was called here, and the second one was right after this. And it happened, like, let's say if a reference of one JavaScript is found in another one, the another one would be called the moment first one loads and the browser finds its reference. So that's how this happened, right? So if you look at the network tab also, you may be able to understand that it happened at a different time frame. Although it took significantly lower time this time around because it's a very simple website, but then in case if you're working on a larger website, it's gonna really cost you a lot, right? So you may notice that it took roughly about 8.2 milliseconds, and all of these calls over here, you can say dummyjson.com. These are the calls which are happening for your images on your HTML page and how they are happening. And again, bring your attention to that. So let's just go back to code, and you may notice that src.user images. So this image is nothing but an object, or nothing but the response that we are trying to fiddle with. So you can see the image here, and this is the dummy URL, or this is the URL where we download all these images, right? So now we are going to be implementing the optimize image, and in order to do this, I'll again take you back to the Chrome browser, and there the Chrome browser, you can see that in order to optimize images, I believe that you have understood how this is really happening in a sequence, one after the other, right? And then I'll also show you practically like how it really works, but then you need to wait a little for that, right? So what I'm going to do is, like, I'll just put all the optimization things given by Angular framework, and then we'll try to recalculate this, right? So in order to do this, you first of all have to import the NgOptimizedImage from Angular common. So let me go back to here, NgOptimizedImage, and then I'm going to be putting this here. It's fairly simple, and once you write it down here, it tells you that you have not really use the NgOptimizedImage in the template. And how do we do that? It's fairly simple. So in order to use it, I'll have to change the template a little bit, right? So how do we change it? Let me take you to the component here, and you may notice that right now I'm giving the src user image. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'll, instead of src, I'm going to be putting it NgSRC. It is basically part of the template directive defined by Angular. So you can see that the yellow color squiggly, or the warning that we were receiving, has gone now. So now if I come back here, what I'm going to do is, like, whenever you define any of it, right, it also recommended that you define the height and the width of that particular image. So let's say I gave 100 is 200. So NgSRC is going to be 100 to 200. And again, let me take you back to the Chrome, and here the Chrome, what I'm going to do is, like, I'll just give it a refresh here. You may notice that it's roughly same, and let's just put this here. Again, you may notice that the images are being fired roughly at the same time. Still, there is no difference from the previous time, right? So it almost happened sequentially, and it still is. So essentially there is no improvement. And if you look at the load, it is still roughly around 110 milliseconds sort of. So it's not significant. And right, so now let me take you back to the code, and we are going to be changing a few other things here. Once you reach here in the code, you may notice that we have also defined the height and the width. And whenever you do this, right, so you may notice that this user images is essentially coming from this particular response, and all of these images tag over here. So let's just look at all of these images. You may notice that these images are essentially coming from dummyjson.com, and see it's coming from the dummyjson. There is a particular thing that you do whenever you have these, when you know that your CDN is hosted at some place, or let's say if you have your images coming from a certain URL or certain certain domain. So what you do is, like, you in the index.html, you also define a preconnect, right? So what is preconnect? You define a link, and the relation you give as Preconnect, and then the href is going to be https JSON. Hold it. Yes. So the idea of giving this preconnect tag whenever your index.html page loads, what it essentially does is that it basically keeps track of your or it basically establish connection with the URL that you've given in the href in the case of a preconnect. So what happens is that the handshaking or the download would be a little faster. It does not really wait for your first URL to or for a first request to be made to that particular domain in order to do the handshaking, or in order to keep the connection, right? So what it does is, like, preconnect automatically connects to the moment it finds in the index.html, it connects to this particular it connects to this particular URL, and it does the handshaking. And by the time you land on the page, or by the time your image tag actually image tag is written on the HTML, the connection has already happened. So it saves a little bit of time there, right? So what I'm going to do is, like, again take you back to the Chrome browser, and let's see if there's any improvement after giving a pre-tag. So you may notice that it's taking roughly about 4 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds. So let me give this a refresh here. You can see that the load has happened a little quick this time, but then let's just look at these. So you may notice that it has all come down to 4 milliseconds, or a little bit better, right? So there's another way of optimizing these, and in order to do that, again I'll take you back to the code. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to be talking about is something called priority. Please understand that whenever you define a priority tag in your image, right, Angular automatically understands it, and it gives the fetch priority as high and loading as equal. So what does it really mean is that before that particular HTML is rendered on your browser, it understands that what are the URL that it needs to bring early, and then once you do that, or once you hit by the time your HTML arrives, like the request for that particular URL would have already been made. So let's just look that in action, right? OITY. But then we are going to be rendering roughly about 30 search images, and then I think giving a priority to all those 30 is not really a wise thing to do. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'll just define a for loop here, and let me put this inside this for loop, or rather if block. And in case of an if, what I'm going to do is, like, let's say if the user ID is less than 6, that's when it happens. Else I'm not going to be defining the priority, so I'll just remove the priority tag. So what it essentially means is that what happens in this case is that, let's say if your user ID is less than 6, in case so let's just look at this. So firstly, we have a user ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, and that's how it is being increasing. What would happen to these 5? So priority tag would only be applied to these early 5 tags or early 5 records, right? So what would really happen, you may notice that we have been noticing the timeline already all that while. So now I'm going to be showing you what if you give the priority and how does it really change your LC, largest contentful page, which is LCP, and also the onload, which is depicted by the red line in the Chrome dev tool, right? So let me take you back to the Chrome browser, and here is the Chrome browser. I'll give it a refresh once again, and then what I'm going to do is, like, I'll just remove all of this, and there you go. Let's just wait for it to load completely, and then frame the graphs in the background, and then I'll show you how it works. So there you go. So if I bring it down here, we notice that, all that while we had been seeing that your images were loaded at this level, it did not really load. But if you look at these 5 images, the call for these 5 images were made much early, before all of these. And how did it happen? It's because of the priority, because the priority of those images were given as high. So what happens is that the moment you define the priority, browser understands it as if that these images needs to be loaded first. So when do you really define in these such type of priorities is, let's say if we want to display the landing page as quickly as possible, right? And in such cases, you can't really wait for your HTML page on the browser to make an HTTP call to bring those images. So in order to achieve this, you can define that with the priority tag. But then if you give the priority tag to all of these, what would really happen, that it'll actually delay the onload. The reason why it would delay the onload is because everything would be prioritized, and then it'll create, if everything is prioritized, you're not really distinguishing like how to which one to load first and which one to load later, and that's why it'll create a little mess in your browser, and that's all we're going to be seeing now in the action, right? So let me take you back to the code, and what I'm going to do is, like, I'll just define the priority to all of these, save it, take you back to the Chrome, and let me refresh this. So if you notice, it has the priority to all these images were early, and they all appeared here. But then if you look at the console, it says that, and you read about this particular message, right? So the priority attribute is set to more than 10 times. It's actually 30. Marking too many images for high priority can hurt your application LCP. The priority should only be set to images expected to be page LCP element, right? You understand what I mean? So LCP in the sense, like, which is the one which is on the viewport, and something that will affect your LCP eventually. Those are the one which are required to be given this priority tag in your web browser. So now again, it will take you back to the Chrome code, and then it'll remove this, save this, come back to Chrome once again, and let me just refresh this. You can see that the warning of it has already been gone. Let me refresh once again, you can see that the warning is not really appearing because it's all good now. Let me close this, give it a refresh, and let's see how it works this time. Let me highlight this, put this back here, you can see that only these 5 images had the highest priority. That's why they were loaded early. And by the time user landed on this particular page, it became visible. Please note, these tags and these optimization may not really make sense if you are working on the highest in the best possible network. Let's say if your network is slow, and let's say if you have some constraint towards the speed of your system. In such cases, making use of these optimization would really improve your browser, improve the performance of your page, right? So that's why it is very much needed to know these and make use of these in case if you want to do more about it, right? So that's pretty much it, ladies and gentlemen, and I think we are pretty much sorted here. There are a few other things that I'm going to be talking about, which is like so up until now we have spoken about the directive NgOptimizedImage. We have also spoken about the priority. Height and width is also something that we have already spoken about. So next I'm going to be talking about is the fill property, and then we will see what placeholder is, and then we'll finally wrap this up. So in order to understand fill property, I'll just take you there first and then we'll talk about it, right? So using the fill mode, what really happens is that you can actually define that fill inside the image tag like the way it is given here. And what would happen, like let's say if you wish to give, while your image loads on your page, you wish to give a background image kind of a feel, then the fill mode would really be helpful and handy. So in that case, what really happens is that it gives us it gives you a sort of a background feel, and you don't really need to include width and height in this case, because you do not know exactly what would be the dimension of your image. In that case, you can actually give the fill mode. And further down, if you come here, you have a placeholder. So placeholder essentially means that, let's say if you are defining your image and if your image is being loaded, in that case, until then, what is the kind of image that you wish to display? So let's say if you decide, so normally what happens is that in case of when you're using a placeholder, you would have to define the base 64 image. That's something which is which also represented in the base 64 in a large URL, and then you can just include that in the in your data, like the way given over here, right? So data URI in place, URL placeholder, right? So what would happen in this particular case is that until the cat.jpg is being loaded in the background, the placeholder would be shown until the image is available, right? So that way user would not really see a jank, or user would not really see a flutter on your screen, and it will be an easy transition and a good to look at transition, right? So here on the placeholder, there is another property which is called blur. So let's say if you do not wish to display the blur, and in that case, you can define that placeholder config as blur, and then can make your things work. So this is all about that, ladies and gentlemen. And you have further few other properties, and then if you want to know more about it, please do write down in the comment section below, and I'll try to create a separate video tutorial around it. But I've just given you a gist of everything on this particular page, and then I think this is pretty much good for you to get started and write amazing web pages and amazing apps using Angular framework. So please note, if you have not really subscribed to my channel, please do so, because it takes a lot of effort to create these tutorials for you. And if you're liking my work, please do subscribe to my channel, and also hit the bell icon in case if I post a new video, you would be notified. So in next tutorial, we are going to be talking about routing, and it's going to be again very, very interesting. So please stay tuned and do subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.